Welcome to the Church Collective podcast. In this episode, I had the opportunity to talk with Steven Curtis Chapman, and I think you are going to absolutely love this. He has got so much wisdom, and he's been at this for so long. I think you're going to be able to get so much out of this. So here we go with the podcast.
Last few years, I have thought a lot about, obviously we've been through so much going on in our world and just global pandemic and so many things that, the way I process life and faith and what's God teaching me and what do I think, is going on in the world. Songs are how I've always done that. And, you can almost go back and listen to my life, through my music and probably figure out generally the ages of my kids, where I am in my married journey. You can almost hear all that because it's just very honest for me this is how I kind of wrestle with these things.
Yeah.
And, and 35 years ago, this year was my first album. So I knew that I was kind of coming up on that sort of mile marker of 35 years, you know, um, as a songwriter, communicator, a guy who's always, written songs out of that place of wanting to just share my journey with whoever will listen and encourage them. I've had incredible, obviously success beyond anything I could have imagined.
Yeah.
And so one of the challenges for we insecure artists, and I'm just going to say we all are, because then I feel
Right.
less, alone and, like the goofy one. But I think we all are at some level, with new music, when you've had a long history of success, a lot of times if I play a new song or have new music, at this point in my career, many times people will be like, man, that's really nice, but gosh, you're never going to write, The Great Adventure. Now that was the song that really changed my life. Or, name the song, Cinderella,
Yeah.
I Will Be Here. Oh man, Dive. Now, when that record came out, I was in da 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 da, and they start telling you a story, which is awesome. It's so encouraging. But the flip side of it is you kind of just said that, whatever new thing you have to say, thank you, but I'm not really that interested in that. Because when I
Yeah.
think of Stephen Curtis Chapman, I think of that, and it's
Right.
a reality. I mean, I got a friend of mine who is the biggest, he'll say, I'm probably the biggest U2 fan on the planet, but I really don't care if they make any new music because I am a U2 fan of the music that means so much to me throughout my life. And it takes me to these places in my life and in my memory, and
Yeah.
it'll always mean that to me. So, all that as a backdrop for me to kind of wrestle through, there's nothing contractually saying I have to make another album. There's nothing, and there's even some things that make me wonder, does the world need or care if Stephen Curtis Chapman makes new music? Would they rather just hear me sing the songs that mean so much? And I'm thankful for that. That's an incredible blessing.
Yeah.
But I also found myself saying, you know what? I need to write these songs and record these songs. And I'll trust God with, who needs to hear them or where they go. But I know for me, it's important for me to put these, thoughts to music and record these songs that I've been writing because my perspective at this point in my life is something that I wouldn't have had perspective of even 5, 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
When I sing a song, about God's faithfulness, and I sang it when I wrote The Great Adventure, it's a whole deeper, way deeper level of what I mean and what my experience is. And there's a lot more battle scars and there's a lot more pain, but a lot more, depth of, the hope that's in that when I sing about it now. And
Yeah.
so that's really what the song still, the whole project, all the songs that I started to write, I realized I still have this passion and this compelling to write and sing songs about God's faithfulness and God's goodness because I still believe it. I'm still married by His grace. I'm still believing. I'm still on my faith journey.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm still figuring it out and I'm still a mess and I'm still in progress. That word still just captured so much for me about where I am musically, my faith, and all of that. And I think there's a real power in that word. When we see so much changing in our world and deconstructing and all the things going on in faith and in the church and politically and racially and certainly the pandemic, just a word like still just felt like Yeah, that's an anchor that I'm gonna drop and write that song.
Yeah. I'd love like I was thinking as you're talking about all that stillness there, like I would love to just pick your brain a little bit, like how and I'd imagine you're just gonna say it's by the Lord's grace, but I would just love to hear like
Yeah,
how have you set yourself up for this longevity, just both like I guess even in the industry, but I think more importantly with the Lord. I mean, like you said, so many people are like walking away from church or faith or
yeah,
some version of both of those.
right.
But
Yeah,
how do we not end up like that?
yeah. I really think one of the things is, for me, having this, uh, you know, this calling and platform and, uh, in a sense, a responsibility that comes with that too, uh, and feeling that, to say, um, I'm gonna, I've been given this opportunity to sing and encourage people in their faith journey.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm struggling. I'm feeling the doubt, especially walking through, what I have in the recent years, the loss of our youngest daughter,
Yeah.
Maria, 14 years ago now,
Yeah.
where my life and faith journey and, my wife and I walking through, she's written a book about it. We've written, both of our versions and our stories. My wife, battling, with, you know, uh, depression and the impact of that. I mean, just being honest in those things, um, and all of those things, either they do one of two things. I heard somebody say a long time ago, trouble will come into your life. Now, I'll try everything I can. I'm a fixer. In fact, there's a song on my new album called Unfixables. And the question I wrestle with, what do I do with all these unfixables? More
Yeah.
and more, the longer I go in my life, I realize there are things in this world, in this life, that are not fixable. There are things about my relationship with my wife and things that we can work on. And we've been to every counselor that Nashville can offer, and none of them have been able to fix us yet. And we've spent a lot of money with them, and I'm really kind of mad about it. But no, uh, but and I've read a lot of the books, and they haven't fixed us
Yeah.
either. And
Sure.
there's a part of me that thinks, I think the reality is, as much as I am a fixer, I'm never going to get a lot of these things fixed. Of course, the ultimate unfixable as a father would be to lose a child. Well, then we walk through that process, and you carry that, and you so what do you do with those things? Those things are going to come into our lives as just the human experience. um and maybe foolishly, like some, I certainly had this understanding, growing up with this, gospel message being God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life. So
Yeah.
when you begin to realize, wait a minute, that wonderful plan might not be so wonderful sometimes. In fact, it
Yeah.
might really not make any sense. And in fact, it might really be way harder than I imagined. And God's not fixing this. And I can't figure out how to fix me or fix this thing that's broken. So what am I going to do with it? And when those things come into our life, I remember someone years ago, and I'm a simple picture guy, and they just said things come into our life, and it's like either they fall one place or the other, and we really decide where they fall. They either fall between us and God when those circumstances come that we can't understand or we can't figure out, and they push us away and they become a divider. And we're like, well, if God lets that happen, then I'm out on that. Or
Yeah.
if God doesn't explain this, or that doesn't make sense, that doesn't fit into the paradigm of what I understand. Or we let it fall outside and press us in to God to say, God, I don't understand it. But basically the whole of scripture, when you really start to peel it back, you start to look under the hood, and you start to realize, wait a minute, you know, what is it? Abraham, grew in his faith, as he trusted God, as he, worshiped God. It's like, as he said, God, I'm going to trust you. I don't know how you're going to make good on your promise to make me the father of, as many stars as there are on the heaven, but I'm going to trust you, or Job, or,
Yeah.
King David, or whatever. So I think it's, you are right. My answer is it's the grace of God. But, what's that look like? Well, that's everything from making those choices, but even that, making those choices are the result of God, putting in our lives, and me seeking out godly counsel, pastors, those who mentored me through their books from, C.S. Lewis to Oswald Chambers to A.W. Tozer, and people that I've had relationship with like Chuck Colson, and my pastor Scotty Smith for 35 years that has mentored me and walked with me, and just seeking those people out as well, to walk on this journey with.
Yeah. You mentioned like Tozer and stuff. Like what are some of your favorite books and studies and stuff that you go through?
Well, I mean, obviously, I did not grow up as a reader. I read, I think, maybe one or two books, that and that was because I had to, until I was probably early 20s. And then I had a pastor, a very dear friend, who began to kind of say, "Hey, have you ever read, A Pursuit
Yeah.
of God, A.W. Tozer?" I'm like, "No, I never heard of it," and I read it. And so I began to just kind of the cost of discipleship, Dietrich Bonhoeffer,
Yeah.
for a non-reader, I crawled my way
It's
through
a heavy
that
duty.
one, as
Yeah.
you can imagine, heavy
Right.
duty. And I'm sure I've still missed most of it, but I did get, picked up little nuggets. In fact, that's where I wrote a song called "For the Sake of the Call" that actually came that's a direct quote from Cost of Discipleship.
Yeah.
"Children of the Burning Heart" is a direct quote that came from a A.W. Tozer book. Oswald Chambers, many of my songs influenced by his "Utmost for His Highest," and obviously, who of us songwriters, or any of us that haven't been impacted by C.S. Lewis's writings and readings. And there's a song on my new album, in fact, that is called "Do It Again," and someone the other day said, "I'm on to you. That's Chesterton, isn't it?" And I went, "Yeah, you got me. You got me." And I'm not even smart enough to read Chesterton. I just read enough of his great quotes to go, "That's a good,
that's a good one.
thought. I'm writing
Right.
that one, that God is infinitely young. We're the ones who get old. And every day God says, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it again." I was like, "That's amazing. I got to write that." So, those are some, but I wish I was even more of a reader than I am, but I'm still trying. I've got a big old long list of books that, Lord willing, I will get to, one of these days, and get to read all the greats and all the classics. And I'm still trying to get. I mean, I just recently, about 2 years ago, finally read East of Eden. Which
Yeah.
is not a spiritual classic, but man, what an incredible book. And so anyway, I do love. That's my dream, of life, sitting on the beach somewhere just with about 10 books, and somebody saying, "You're not allowed to leave this beach until you've read all those books." I'm like, okay, I think that's called heaven, right?
Right. Well, it sounds like you're saying your songs come from life. I'd love to hear. I'm sure tons of people would love to hear like your songwriting process. Do you go about, I need to make some songs, or do you just kind of let them come as life feel? Like, is it your way of processing? Like, what's it look like for you?
Well, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. The last thing you said, it's really just my way of processing life.
Sure.
If you listen through, if it's, um, when things are going on in the world, my way to wrestle through and try to process so often is just my journaling is songs. I've tried
Yeah.
journaling, and I go back and I've got probably 20 journals that have about 3 pages filled out. And then I'm like, it's like I turn over a new leaf. All right, I'm going to write journals now. I'm going to do this.
Right.
And I get about 3 or 4, days in, and then I, lose my way. But songs, as life is happening, as something, it may be something I've read, it may be something that I'm just processing. And of course, I'm fresh with this newest album of going through the list of songs and the thoughts of, I've got a song, my new record is an example of, my best friend in 7th grade was a kid named Carlton Bell, and he was black and I was white, and I never even really thought about it. I grew up, with a lot of folks on our street where I grew up were black families, and Carlton was just my best friend. We played drums together in the middle school marching band, and we got to go to Disney World and march in the Disney World parade. So the first time I
Awesome.
ever went to Disney World, and the first time I rode Space Mountain was with my best friend Carlton Bell. So I always think of that when I go back to Disney World, or
Yeah.
first time I experienced any of that. And when all of the racial things, it really started to just intensify in our country these last couple of years, I began to, ask myself and wrestle in ways I never had with, gosh, I don't know, what it's like, the perspective of, friends of mine who are Black, and sat around my fire pit here one night with, you know, white and Black friends, and just said, talk to me. Let's just talk about what's it been like, you know, growing up and being, in your skin, and that I wouldn't ever understand. And I kept thinking about my friend Carlton, and I wrote a song called Living Color. And it's just a story song about my best friend when I was in 7th grade. Just, I wonder what happened to him. And then as the song, I won't give it away, spoiler alert, on it, but I kind of explained the song of just going into the process of trying to track him down and see, what it was, and kind of where it took me. And even with that, even in that song, trying to be as honest as I could, there's even a lyric in the song that says, if I'm honest, I'm scared to even write and sing this song because I don't want to somehow say the wrong thing. The danger of even trying to be honest and say, man, this is such a hot button and a hot topic. I don't want to do this wrong. So maybe I shouldn't even do it. And I was like, well, I'm going to process this out as honest as I can. And, in a song. And that's the way I was able to do that. So, it's that kind of thing. It's the stuff that's stirring in me, the things that I look around and think, these are I want to encourage others, from my own perspective. I mean, I've become in the last few years, a fan of Bruce Springsteen. Last couple of records I think are just amazing. He made a record called Letter to You and a record called Western Stars. And I've never been a huge Springsteen fan, but I not that I didn't, I've always had a respect for him, but just, really knowing the records and, knowing all track 5 and 6 and 7, I just know the hits like most people, unless you're a real fan. Well, these last few years, I've just kind of tapped into his art, his poetry, his storytelling as a songwriter, and been really inspired by it. And here's a guy, he's 70 years old. He could have hung his guitar up a long time ago. Didn't have to make new music, but I'm really thankful that he did, because it's inspired me, and it's great art that just, I've found a real inspiration from. And so I think that was one of the things, even for me, it's like there's a perspective at this point in my life, and this songwriting process, that's always what I've done, is just, let me share my perspective now. Cinderella, I wouldn't have ever written that song had I not had 2 little girls that wanted to dance with me one night, and I was tired, and I never sat down and thought I need to write a song about
Right.
dad who shows up for his daughters, so what can I write about? It just happened, and I put it to music. So that's a lot of where my music comes from.
Yeah, so many wedding songs out of that one, or wedding dances.
Yeah.
Out of that one.
Yeah. Oh yeah, been a few.
What I'd love to, like, just a little bit of time here, I'd love to hear your thoughts, having 35 years in the industry and kind of like the church and church music and Christian music. What do you think? What's your gut on where we're going in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah,
as much as you can. It feels like I ask this a lot for a lot of people, and we're all kind of like, man, I have no idea, but the Lord's good.
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
Like,
there it is. That's the
answer.
If I may, because I certainly don't have a crystal ball, and I don't, so I don't have any idea where it's going. I know where I hope it's going, and where I get hopeful that it could go, and that is clearly, I am deeply grateful for, and even sort of ventured into corporate worship out of my own experience of how important and really life and soul saving for me, declaration songs like "Blessed be the name of the Lord, you give, you take away." Excuse me. Those songs were truly lifelines for me when we lost our daughter, to just when I couldn't sing anything else, and I really wasn't even singing that, I was more squeaking it out or screaming it at the top of my lungs, but just saying, God, this is what I'm going to choose. And I didn't, I didn't need or want, or it wasn't time to think a story song. I don't know if I'll ever write those again. I just need to be able to say, God, I'm going to trust you. God, I'm going to trust you. God, I'm going to trust you.
Yeah.
Just and so out of that, wrote some songs that were in that sort of vertical, corporate worship sort of thing, with an album called Worship and Believe. And so deeply grateful for the worship music movement and how it's given voice to, to the church, contemporary church, to express, our worship and our thanks to the Lord. I with that miss begin to miss the songs that do, again, take you on a journey, tell a story.
Yeah.
And the New Testament is full of, I mean, the whole of the Bible is a story. God reveals himself in story.
Yeah.
Jesus over and over again, the kingdom of heaven is like, and I'm going to tell you a story. A servant, a master calls his servants in, he's going away, and I'm going to tell you this story. And so I love that, and I'm drawn to that. So storytelling, great storytelling. We should be the best storytellers of all, because we have the best story to tell. We should
Right.
be the most creative artist. We should write the most clever songs.
Yeah.
The most fresh. I never heard it said like that. C.S. Lewis again. We go back over and over
Right.
and over again, because
Yeah.
here's a guy who, creatively painted a picture of the gospel in a way that, someone who didn't even know that's it, what they were getting. They were, thought they were just reading a story about, a lion and this, fantasy world. That the brilliance of that, just the beauty, I think of of truth in that, the way it shines and it's illuminated, art that's illuminated with truth. That's always been.
Yeah.
I heard somebody say that years ago, and I'm like, that's what I want to do. That I want to make great art that is just kind of has this glow about it, because it's got the truth. So there's great songs, there's great art. I mentioned Bruce Springsteen. I can tell you the songs I love, but and they're great. It's great art. But then I'm like, man, if that's good, well, what happens if it gets the glow of of the gospel, of
Yeah.
eternal truth? Put
Right.
that in, man. That's what I aspire to, hope for, and hope to see continue in Christian music. And because if anybody ought to be doing it the best of anybody, it ought to be those of us who know where it comes from.
Right. Yeah.
And that is my hope. And like I say, with the growth of worship music so much, I think that's taken a back seat in some ways. I'm encouraged to know and see and hear of artists who are compelled to continue to write those kind of songs. I think it's a both and. We need both.
Right. Yeah,
But
that's
not
huge.
one to the exclusion of the other. And not just in music, but in filmmaking, and
Yeah.
in all of it across the board. I mean, I'm so proud of my boys. They're my sons Caleb and Will are in a band called Colony House, and
Yeah. Yeah.
they're amazing alternative rock musicians, who are making great art illuminated by their faith. And and it's not music that they're like their dad made, but I see them writing great songs and telling great stories, and making fun music that people go, man, that's so fun. And it's got a pureness about it too. What is that? How can you do that?
Right.
I
Yeah.
thought
Well,
fun
let me tell you about
had to
that.
be this. So then you
Yeah.
get the opportunity. Yeah. So
Right.
anyway, that's
Yeah.
not really an answer, but that's my
No,
best
that's
answer.
fantastic. Yeah, that's awesome.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. Make sure you're connecting with us everywhere: Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Pinterest. We are all over the place and can't wait to say hey.